Hello again, my dear students. Now we're gonna complete the rest of your syllabus, the last unit, Unit 8 on track. Uh, okay, before this, please open your book, page 114, on track book, page 114. This is the last unit, Unit 8. Okay, the title of the unit, which is Lessons Learned. Lessons learned. Okay, let's listen to the text with each other, then we're gonna explain.
Unit 8, Track 22, Lessons Learnt.
Smith and I didn't like each other from the moment we met. Here's how it went down. After working 3.5 years in the London Underground on a station clean-up crew, I was done with the litter and the rats. So when I heard the Public Transport Authority was hiring a batch of new train operators, I was pretty excited. My pay would triple to £35 an hour if I made it. I could stop coming home smelling like rubbish. Plus, as an operator, I could close the swinging doors to the operator's booth at the front of the train. That meant heat in the winter, air conditioning all summer, a shiny piece of stainless steel separating me from the city smells and all the restless people. So I applied, and surprisingly, I got accepted.
Okay, in this part, Shabab, it's so clear here that there is a guy, there is someone who didn't like Smith, another one who was called Smith. But before he knew Smith, he tells us about his work. So Smith and I didn't like each other from the moment we met. Here is how it went down. After working 3.5 years in the London Underground before he knew Smith on a station clean-up crew, he was a cleaner. I was done. He fed up with the litter and rats. So when I heard the Public Transport Authority was hiring a batch, the word batch, which means a group of people of a new train operators, the Public Train Authority was employing a group of new train operators. I was pretty excited. He wanted, of course, to apply in the job. My pay, his salary, would triple times three, okay, to 300 or $35 an hour if I made it. I could stop coming home smelling like rubbish. Plus, as an operator, I could close the swinging door to the operator's booth. The word booth, شباب, which means like cabin, for someone to work in or to make a telephone. Okay, it's called booth. In the past, there was a lot of telephone booths in streets in order to make calls at the front of the train. That meant heat in winter, air conditioning all summer, a shiny piece of stainless steel separating me from the city smells and all the restless people. So I applied and surprisingly I got accepted. So here he tells us that from the very beginning that he had a new job and he will apply for it. Let's listen.
On the first day of May, I was running down a carpeted hallway to the classroom when I ran into this guy. I'm serious. We literally bumped into each other. After we bounced off one another, the man was looking me up and down. His eyes narrowed, his nose even scrunched, and I could tell what he was thinking.
This guy's a loser.
I'm not going to lie. I was thinking some pretty rude things right back at him.
Okay, here he tells us in that part. He tells us about how did he know that person. So on the first day of May, I was running down a carpet hallway to the classroom. طبعا the classroom because now he is a trainee, so he went to a classroom in order to learn how to be an operator. Okay, so when I ran into this guy, I ran into, which means I met someone by chance, accidentally. I am serious. We literally bumped into each other. We bumped into each other. They met and they hit each other accidentally. Okay. After we bounced off one another, bounced off, which means when you hit someone accidentally, it's not intentionally, it's accidentally. You bump off each other and you hit him, and then you go back. You go backward like one step, two steps, and so on. One another. The man was looking me up and down. His eyes narrowed, his nose even scrunched, and I could tell what he was thinking. This guy is a loser. Of course, they didn't like each other from the very beginning. I am not going to lie, I was thinking some pretty rude things back to him. Okay, يعني they didn't like each other from the very beginning. Okay, let's listen.
He had on these thick glasses, a green polo shirt, khaki pants, his hair slicked back, carrying a heavy backpack. Plus, he was a good 5 inches shorter than me. So I stood there thinking, this guy is a total nerd, and he's looking at me in the eye. I got really mad. I was about to say something like, what are you looking at, son? When I remembered the teacher and the whole classroom full of people looking right at us.
Okay, so again at that part he tells us what that man looked like. He was wearing thick glasses, a green polo shirt, khaki pants, his hair slicked back, carrying a heavy backpack. Plus, he was a good 5 inch shorter than me. He was shorter than Smith was shorter than him. So I stood there thinking, this guy is a total nerd. The word nerd, which means a very strange person, and he is looking me in the eye. I got really mad. I was about to say something like, what are you looking at, son? Of course, the word son here because he's shorter than him. Then I remember the teacher and the whole classroom. We have said it's not classroom in a school. They are. He is a trainee, so he got his training course at that place. And the teacher here, of course, he is someone who is working at the public train at the public transport authority. Okay. The whole classroom full of people looking at us. So he didn't tell him or he didn't say anything to him. Okay, let's listen. Complete.
I froze when Ron Smith gave me a little nod, passed in front of me and walked right into the classroom, left me holding the door like some kind of butler. I was all confused and angry. He was too full of himself and held his ground. I tried my best not to show my anger. I walked into the classroom slowly and took a seat right behind Ron Smith.
Okay, after this, I froze when Ron Smith, that person, gave me a little nod, passed in front of me, and walked right into the classroom, left me holding the door like some kind of butler. Yani he meant here that Smith treated him as if he is a butler, the word butler, which means a servant. I was all confused and angry. He was too full of himself. He was too proud, and he held his ground. I tried my best not to show my anger. I walked into the classroom slowly and took a seat right behind Ron Smith. Okay, so he sat right behind Ron Smith. And let's listen.
Being a London Underground operator isn't easy. On most days, there's nothing to do. After the conductor closes the door, I reach down, take this little wheel in my hand and spin it to the right like a clock. This gets the train moving forward. When the front of the train noses into the next station, I start spinning the wheel back the other way to cut the power, and then pull the brake lever back towards me. Almost anyone can drive a train, but it needs some practice to do it well. Right from the start.
Okay, now he tells us about his training course. Being London Underground operator is not easy. On most days, there is nothing to do. After the conductor closed the door, I reach down, take this little wheel in my hand, and spin it, spin, which means to make something move around, and spin it to the right, like a clock. This gets the train moving forward. When the front of the train noses into the next station, I start spinning the wheel. The word spinning, which means, well, I have just said it, the word spin to make something move around. Spinning the wheel back to the other way to cut the power, and then pull the brake lever back towards me. Almost anyone can drive a train, but it needs some practice to do it well. Okay, so that was the first part of that unit. I hope you will study these words well. I'm gonna complete it next time, inshallah. Okay, again, guys, we're gonna complete the rest of Unit 8 on track. So please concentrate with me. Open page 115. Okay, I'm gonna listen to the following part, and then we're gonna explain it. Listen to the text.
Well, right from the start, I was good with the wheel. That little twerp, Ron Smith, kept whining about how hard it was to gauge the distances in the tunnel, but I just picked it right up. What I couldn't handle was the math. How was I supposed to run all those calculations required to slow down before every stop in my head while I looked out the window, worked the wheel, watched the speed dial, pulled the brake lever, and followed the radio? The train.
Okay, now the writer tells us about his story from the very beginning and how could he drive the train. So right from the start, I was good with the wheel. That little twerp, Ron Smith. He described Ron Smith as twerp, which means stupid. Kept, the writer was so good at with the wheel, but Ron Smith, the stupid person, kept whining. The word whining, which means complaining about hard it was to gauge, the word gauge, which means to measure the distance in the channel. But I just picked it right up. When I couldn't handle the math, the problem, or the writer's problem was about the math. How math? How was I supposed to run all those calculations required to slow down before every stop in my head while I looked out of the window, worked the wheel, watched the speed dial, pulled the brake lever, and followed the radio? So before he stopped, he must calculate the distance and when he could slow down the speed. So he must make some calculations, and it was not easy for the writer. Let's listen.
We used while training had about 12 cameras in the cockpit. As one student went outside to drive the train, the teacher and the rest of the class sat inside the classroom and watched the trainees' movements on the huge screen. When I drove, I never heard a peep from the teacher until I was about to stop.
You're smooth as glass from takeoff to full speed, Aiken,
said the teacher, an old guy named Mr. Molden, who'd been driving trains for 3 decades. It seemed to me he was just close to retirement.
Okay, the train we used while training, this is the train for training, had about 12 cameras in the cockpit. As one student went outside to drive the train, the teacher and the rest of the class sat inside the classroom and watched the trainees' movements on huge screens. While I drove, I never heard a peep from the teacher until I was about to stop. Okay, so the word cockpit, shabab, which means the cabin where the driver works or the pilot works on the plane. Okay. The teacher told him, "You are smooth as glass from takeoff to full speed, Elkan," said the teacher. An old guy named Mr. Molden, who had been driving trains for 3 decades. Of course, he was not he was old. He was not young. It seemed to me he was just close to retirement. Of course, the word retirement, which means he was going to leave work. Okay, to retire. Let's listen.
Next, we watched Ron Smith take out his first train. On the monitors, it looked like he was staring out into space. His first time at the wheel, and this guy was driving entirely by math. I was amazed. So was Mr. Molden, who said,
I don't think I've ever seen that.
When Smith had to stop, the problems began. He spun the wheel and pulled the brake lever in the wrong directions. Quickly, Molden reached for the big red button on the wall of the classroom to cut the power to the train. The train stopped with a screech we could hear inside the building.
I swear to God, if either of you drives my train off the track, I'll kick you back to where you came from.
Molden said angrily to the whole class.
Okay, now he's gonna tell us what happened when Ron Smith. It was Ron Smith's turn, and now he is going to drive the train, as of course as a trainee. Next, we watched Ron Smith take out his first train on the monitor. طبعا the other trainees now are watching him from the monitor. It looked like he was steering out into space his first time at the wheel, and this guy was driving entirely by math. طبعا the word entirely which means as a whole يعني by math. I was amazed. So was Mr. Molden who said, Mr. Molden told them, I don't think I have ever seen that. When Smith had to stop, the problems began. What happened when Ron Smith had to stop the train? He spun the wheel and pulled the brake lever in the wrong direction. So of course now the problem was about to happen. Quickly, Molden reached for the big red button on the wall to the classroom to cut all power to the train. The train stopped with a screeching sound we could hear inside the building. Okay, and told them, the driver or Mr. Molden told them, I swear to God, if either one of you drives my train off the track, I will kick you back to where you came from. I will fire you. Molden said angrily to the whole class. So listen.
On my first day of driving a real train on a real track with real living passengers, I was paired with Ron Smith. I breathed pretty heavily and started to complain, but Molden just looked up at me, all wide-eyed.
If you guys got a problem with that, I'm sure I can find a cleanup crew that would welcome you.
Molden said. 2 hours later, I was driving a downtown Local 6 train, standing next to Ron Smith. We were pulling up to Tottenham Court Road when some passenger pulled the fire alarm. The train's emergency system cut the engines and pulled the brakes until we stopped. Then we smelled the smoke. The fire was close to the front of the train, and it was pretty big. Outside the control booth, the air in the tunnel grew dark with smoke. Smith and I reached through for the telephone. I still had a better sense of the booth's layout than he did, so I found it first, lifted the receiver, and made the announcement we've practiced in training.
Okay, so now he gonna tell us what happened to him on his first day of driving a real train on a real track with a real living passengers. This is the first time for him to drive a train with real living passengers. I was paired with Ron Smith. Ron Smith with him was his partner. I breathed heavily, pretty heavily, and I started to complain, but Molden just looked up at me and me all wiped eyes. If you guys got a problem with that, I'm sure I can find a cleanup crew that would welcome you, Molden said. 2 hours later, I was driving a downtown local 6 train standing next to Ron Smith. We were pulling up to Tottenham Court Road when some passengers pulled the fire alarm. Now, some passengers pulled the fire alarm. The train's emergency system cut the engines and pulled the brakes until we stopped. Then we smelled the smoke. So, of course, now there was a fire. The fire was close to the front of the train and it was pretty big. The fire was not easy, it was pretty big. Outside the control booth, the air in the channel grew dark with smoke. Okay. Okay, you guys, now we're gonna stop at that part and we're gonna complete the rest of the text next time, inshallah. Thanks a lot. Okay, guys. Now we're gonna complete the last part of your of this unit, Unit 8. As we have done before, we're gonna listen, then we're gonna explain the rest of the unit. That's page 116. So please open page 116 in front of you and listen carefully.
Telephone. I still had a better sense of the booth's layout than he did, so I found it first, lifted the receiver, and made the announcement we've practiced in training. There is an emergency on the train. Please remain calm. Please walk to the nearest exit. Do not run. I repeat, please walk to the nearest exit.
Okay, now we have stopped last time that we have said there was a fire, and now Smith and I, the writer, reached through for the telephone. I still had a better sense of the phone of the both's layout than he did. So I found it first, lifted the receiver, and made the announcement we have practiced in training. He said in a very loud voice to all passengers. There is an emergency on the train. Please remain calm. Please walk to the nearest exit. Do not run. Repeat, please walk to the nearest exit. Okay, let's see what is going to happen after this.
Then I did something stupid. I opened the control booth door. I thought I could help, figure out where the fire was, calm people down, help them escape. Smith did a better job remembering our training. He tried to block the door, but I was already out.
Don't! They told us not to!
He said. Opening the door delivered a rush of air right to the fire. The flames leapt from the floor, and a wall of black smoke hit me in the face. I fell to the ground, started coughing, and couldn't stop. I couldn't catch my breath. I got dizzy fast, spun around and tried crawling for what I hoped was the control room. I felt an arm weave itself under my armpit and lift me to my feet. My rescuer's face was right next to mine, but I couldn't see who it was in the black smoke.
Okay, now the writer said that he did something stupid. I opened the control booth door. I thought, why did he open it? He thought he could help figure out where the fire was, calm people down, help them escape, and so on. Smith did a better job. He now said clearly that Smith did a better job. Remembering our training, he tried to block the door, but I was already out. So Smith told him, "Don't! They told us not to open the door." Opening the door delivered a rush of air right to the fire. The flames leaped from the door. Now, of course, the fire became bigger, and a wall of black smoke hit me in the face. I fell to the ground, started coughing, and couldn't stop. I couldn't catch my breath. I got dizzy fast, spun around, and tried crawling for what I hoped for was the control room. I felt an alarm weave, the word weave, which means to move in a hidden way itself under my armpit and left me to the feet. My rescuer's face was right next to mine, but I couldn't see who each was in the black smoke. Who do you think was the one who rescued him? Let's see.
We stumbled forward to the control room. The man held me up with his right arm, and I used his left to punch out the front window. My rescuer lay beside me, wheezing. I reached down and copied his move, looping my arm under his and hoisting him up. "We can't stay here," I said. We started moving till we saw the red light of an exit sign in the distance. It looked like a bunch of passengers from the train had already gotten there. I smiled and looked over. That's when I saw that the man who rescued me was Ron Smith. I was so surprised. I stopped walking.
Come on!
Okay, so it's very clear here that the one who rescued him was Ron Smith. So of course he was so surprised. Here he said we stumbled, they were going to fall yani. We stumbled forward to the control room. The man held me up, and here the man, of course, he was Ron Smith, held me up with his right arm and used his left to punch out the front window. My rescuer lay beside me, wheezing. The word wheezing, which means to breathe in a very heavy way. I reached down and copied his move, looping my arm under his and hoisting him up. We can't stay here, I said. We started moving till we saw the red light of an exit sign of the distance. It looked like a bunch of passengers, a group of passengers from the train, and had already gotten there, and smiled and looked over. That's when I saw that the man who rescued me was Ron Smith. I was so surprised and stopped walking. And now Ron Smith will tell him,
You big dummy, I'm not letting you die.
Ron said and smiled. He lifted me up and walked. When he grew tired, I moved my shoulder under his and pulled him along. Finally, we reached the steel exit door. Actually, I got there first. I opened it. After you, I said.
No,
Said Ron Smith.
you first.
okay, so the lesson that you learned here from that unit, Shabab, that do not judge a book from its cover, which means do not judge people from the first impression. Maybe they are good people, but we don't know, and we must deal with them to know them first, or to know them well. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for listening, and next time, inshallah, we're gonna complete the unit from your booklet, and we're gonna answer the questions. Thanks a lot.